Hello, nice to meet you here at Math Lab. This lab is serving to enrich the school mathematics as well as to demonstrate the art of problem solving needed for mathematics competitions. Enjoy and have fun.
Hello folks! In this episode, you will learn how to do multiplication and division of fractions, including mixed number. We will walk you through examples and exercises to show you how to do these operations. So let's go! Multiplying fractions. We're going to look at several rules in fraction multiplication. In our first rule, we're going to look at two fractions multiplied together. If I have a fraction a over b multiplied by another fraction c over d, then the resultant fraction, its numerator, is the product of the numerators in the left-hand side, which is a times c. And its denominator is the product of the denominators in the left-hand side, which is b times d. So the resulting fraction is a times c over b times d. Let's keep this rule in mind and look at a few examples. In our first example, we have 3 over 4 multiplied by 5 over 7. Now referring back to the rule that we just looked at, the resulting fraction equals to 3 multiplied by 5 for its numerator and 4 multiplied by 7 for its denominator. So that evaluates to 15 over 28, and that is the final fraction for this example. Now let's look at another example. 3 over 4 multiplied by 1 over 6. So similarly, following the rule, the numerator will equal to the product of 3 multiplied by 1. And the denominator is equal to the product of 4 multiplied by 6. So that evaluates to 3 over 24. Now in this case, 3 over 24 is not a fraction in its simplest form. What that means is that it has a common factor in both the numerator and the denominator. So we should cancel that out. So in this case, 3 is the common factor. So if we cancel that out, that results in 1 over 8. Now let's look at another example. 2 over 5 multiplied by 5 over 6 multiplied by 3 over 8. So this time we have three fractions multiplied together. We can still use the rule and extend it where the numerator becomes the product of all three. That is 2 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 3. And similarly for the denominator, that equals to 5 multiplied by 6 multiplied by 8. Now here you already see that there are some common factors. So the first common factor we have is 2, which is highlighted in red. So 2 is in common with the 2 in the 6 in the denominator. So if we cancel out the 2, that leaves a 3 in the denominator. So the top becomes 1 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 3. And the bottom becomes 5 multiplied by 3 multiplied by 8. Okay. So 3 again is a common factor that can be cancelled out, highlighted in red. So that simplifies the fraction to 1 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 1 over 5 multiplied by 1 multiplied by 8. And 5 again is a common factor. We can continue to cancel it out, and that leaves us 1 over 8. So if you take a note here that we can cancel the common factors first, that's among the numerators and denominators, before we actually multiply them all together. So that makes the entire process of fraction multiplication simpler and faster. Now let's look at what happens when we have an integer multiplied with a fraction. Multiply integer and fraction. So in this case, the integer will be multiplied with the numerator of the fraction, and the denominator stays the same. So if I have integer a multiplied by a fraction c over d, then the resulting fraction is a multiplied by c in the numerator over d. Okay. So if you think more about it, any integer can be represented as a fraction with the denominator equal to 1. So the expression can really turn out into a over 1 multiplied by c over d, and that gives us a multiplied by c over d. So let's look at example. 3 multiplied by 5 over 7. That gives me 3 multiplied by 5 over 7, which is 15 over 7. Now let's take a look at 3 multiplied by 1 over 6. That equals to 3 multiplied by 1 over 6, which is 3/6, which is 1/2. So you probably already noticed that we can actually cancel out the common factor between the integers and the denominator in the process first. So 3 multiplied by 1 over 6, where 3 is a common factor, can be canceled out. That will just leave us with 1 over 2, which is 1/2. Now let's look at how to do multiplication on two mixed numbers. The rule for this operation is we're going to first change the mixed numbers into improper fractions. And then we're going to follow the rules that we learned previously on fraction multiplications to multiply all the improper fractions together. And for the resulting fraction, if it's also an improper fraction, we're going to change it back to a mixed number. So let's look at example. In our example, we're going to multiply two mixed numbers together. 3 and 5/7 multiplied by 2 and 1/6. To change a mixed number into an improper fraction, we take the whole number, multiply that by the numerator of the fraction, the product is added to the denominator. So the two mixed number becomes 3 times 7 plus 5 over 7 for the first one, multiplied by 2 times 6 plus 1 over 6 for the second one. Okay. So now we have two mixed numbers converted into improper fraction, and we're going to evaluate the numbers for the numerators. So 3 times 7 plus 5 is 26. The first one evaluates to 26 over 7. 2 times 6 plus 1 is equal to 13. The second one evaluates to 13 over 6. Okay? So now we have 26 over 7 multiplied by 13 over 6. Okay? Using the fraction multiplication rule, that becomes 26 multiplied by 13 over 7 multiplied by 6. Now 26 and 6 are highlighted in red because they have a common factor. 26 is equal to 2 times 13 and 6 is equal to 2 times 3. So 2 is the common factor and we're going to cancel that out. So that leaves 26 with a 13 and the 6 with a 3. So it becomes 13 times 13 over 7 times 3. So now we can evaluate this expression again, and that gives us 13 times 13 is 169. And 7 times 3 is 21. So that equals to 169 over 21. So here we have a resulting fraction, but this fraction is in an improper form. Okay. So we're going to convert this improper fraction into a mixed number, and that mixed number will be our final answer. In our next step to convert the improper fraction into a mixed number, what we're going to do, as you probably already know from our previous slide, is to use a vertical long division to get the answer. Okay. So we're going to first set up our long division. We have 169 divided by 21. So 169 is the dividend and 21 is the divisor. And we're going to estimate our quotient starting with 8. So 8 multiplied by 1 in the divisor results in 8, and 8 multiplied by 2 in the divisor gives us 16. So we have 168. And the difference of 169 over 168 is 1. Okay? So that will give us a remainder of 1. So here we have a quotient of 8 and a remainder of 1. So the quotient equals to 8. That is the whole number of the mixed number. Okay. And the divisor is 21, and that remains as the denominator of the fraction part in the mixed number. And the remainder 1 is the numerator part of the fraction. So our final mixed number will turn out to be 8 and 1/21. In our previous videos, we have talked about reciprocal. And now let's look at reciprocal again. We're going to review it and then see its extension, particularly on fractions. So the reciprocal of a non-zero integer b is 1/b. Now the reciprocal of a fraction a/b is simply equal to b/a. That is, we have swapped the numerator with the denominator. So let's look at an example. In our first example, what is the reciprocal of the number -5? That is 1/5. And that is also equivalent to -1/5. And that is also equivalent to -1/5. So the negative sign can be put in front of the fraction or on the numerator or on the denominator. They're all equivalent in this case. Now second example, reciprocal of 1/10, which is 10/1, and that just equals to the number 10. Okay. So third example, reciprocal of -23/47. So that is -47/23. Now this is an improper fraction, and we're going to convert that into a mixed number. And the equivalent mixed number for this improper fraction is -2 and 1/23. The reason we're revisiting reciprocal is that it's going to be used in fraction division. The rule for doing fraction division is dividing by a fraction is equal to multiplying the reciprocal of the divisor. So if I have a/b divided by c/d, that is equivalent to a/b multiplied by the reciprocal of c/d, which is d/c. Now if I have an integer a divided by a fraction c/d, that is equivalent to a multiplied by the reciprocal of c/d, which is d/c. And very similarly, if I have a fraction a/b divided by an integer, then it is the same as this fraction multiplied by the reciprocal of the integer. Let's walk through a few examples that will cover all of the cases above. In our first example, what we have is fractions 3/5 divided by another fraction, which is 7/8. Okay. So in here, divide by 7/8 is equal to multiplying its reciprocal. So what we have is 3/5 multiplied by 8/7. Okay. So now we have two fractions multiplying with each other. And following the fraction multiplication rule, we have 3 multiplied by 8 on the numerator and 5 multiplied by 7 on the denominator. And that gives us 24/35. Okay. Let's look at another example. We're also going to divide two fractions together. 5/6 divided by 2/9. So that is equivalent to 5/6 multiplied by the reciprocal of 2/9, which is 9/2. Now using the fraction multiplication rule, we have 5 multiplied by 9/6 multiplied by 2. 9 and 6 are in red because they have a common factor 3. So take out the common factor, that leaves us with 5 multiplied by 3/2 multiplied by 2, which is 15/4. Let's look at our third example, where we have an integer divided by a fraction, 7 divided by 14/15. So similarly, that's equivalent to 7 multiplied by the reciprocal of 14 over 15, which is 15 over 14. And 7 is a common factor, and if we cancel that out, that leaves us with a 1 for the integer part and 2 on the denominator. So that simplifies to 1 multiplied by 15 over 2, which is 15 over 2. That's an improper fraction, and converting to a mixed number is 7 1/2. Now let's look at our last example, where we have a fraction divided by integer, 11 over 13 divided by 5. So similarly, we're going to follow the same rule. We're going to have 11 over 13 multiplied by the reciprocal of 5, which is 1 over 5. And that results in 11 over 13 multiplied by 5, which is 65. And that's our final answer.